So before I talk a little bit about where we're going with the center and what we're trying to do next, I want to share a story. A few years back, I was approached by a consortium. I don't know if this is working. A consortium that they'd been doing performance-based assessment in New York City for several years. They had a waiver from the state to not do the standardized test in every subject except for math. And they had evidence showing it was having a profound effect on kids. Their numbers for kids going to college and staying in college significantly greater than traditional public schools. And it was clear that this was working. And I knew it worked because my daughter went to one of those schools, a school of the future in Manhattan. And so we went to this, John King, while he was still Commissioner of Education in New York, before he got promoted to be Secretary of Education. And we presented the data, and we had a big group of educators with us, and he listened, and we said, we think it's time to increase the number of schools that can do this. And he said, no, I'm not going to support it. We said, why not? He said, because I can't trust the schools. Right? And it was a very honest comment, but how disappointing. All right, how disappointing. And yet another reminder, we can't wait for permission to do what's right. If anything came through today, we can't wait for the policies to be right. We can't wait for the political climate to be right. I think Ken Robinson said it probably best. If change is going to happen, it's going to happen from below. Right? That's where real change happens. If you think about it, yesterday, the election, today's Thursday, 2 days ago, we elected the first transgendered person in the state of Virginia. We elected a Sikh to a mayor of Hoboken, the town of Frank Sinatra, right? And we elected a Liberian immigrant to mayor of Helena, Montana. Wow. So although it might seem a bleak time, I would say that sometimes when you look at the local area, not as bleak as it seems. And that's where I think change in education is going to happen. And that's when we were thinking about this conference. It's true, there were lots of constituencies that were left off. Although we had the president of both of the largest teachers unions in the country, we didn't have a classroom teacher here today. So we also didn't have a parent here today. We also didn't have a student here today, right? These are key constituents. Hard to imagine moving education without them. Now, we did have lots of students yesterday at our town hall, and many of us are also parents. You might even see some of my kids running around here soon. But, you know, this is not the end, right? This is really the beginning. We don't think transformation happens through a conference. We think this is really just about planting some ideas and trying to get others on board. We think that the time is right. So a colleague on campus presented this idea to me, this idea of the three horizons. He said it's an idea from business. Right? And in business, we know that if you don't anticipate how to change, businesses go obsolete. If you think about the top 10 businesses in the country today are not the same as they were 10 years ago. Right? Sears, anybody, when's the last time you went to Sears? Right? Or even Kmart, okay? And so we live at a time where if you either change and adapt or you become obsolete. Now in education, because we've had relatively steady funding, even if it's been totally inadequate, schools have been able to survive, even when they're not successful. On one hand, that's a good thing, because in many of our schools, even many of our struggling schools, the schools they go to are the one place they're sure they're going to get to eat. The one place they're sure they will have heat in the building, adult supervision, some measure of safety, and maybe even lucky enough to get a nurse. They may be woefully inadequate, but in a society where there is no stability for children, particularly our neediest children, our schools are a vital part of the social safety net for kids. And that's why it's an indispensable institution. So the question is, how can that institution adapt to the change in the world we're in? And so part of what we try to do is to say that even amidst all the constraints caused by poverty, constraints caused by bad policies, constraints caused by just systems that don't work well, And they're real. Anybody who spends time in education knows it and becomes frustrated. But you also heard over the course of the day of change happening. You know, when you hear Jose Navarro describe what's going on out there in Pacoima, and I've seen it up close, you know, you see a school that's high functioning despite the challenges all around that community. And what's ironic, it shares a campus with other schools, and while many of those other schools are losing kids, they have a waiting list. And so change is possible. They started school 3 days early to do community building. I said, how do you get the kids to come? We said, we just tell them they have to come, and they come. We didn't ask permission. We just did it. Right? And you heard from Steve Webb talk about building a system of support in Vancouver. They saw the population change. They didn't wait until they had kids showing up hungry. They said, we know the needs are there. We're going to have to address and respond to the needs. So in this Three Horizons framework that comes from the business, say, you know, many of the businesses are stuck in that first level. Those are the businesses that usually go out of business. The schools we have might still be around for a while, but many of them, especially in LA, are losing kids. Okay? They're losing kids, and we know if you're in Los Angeles, this is a system that's not on a sustainable path. Okay? That's where it's at. Either financially, the whole system can't continue the way it is. So the real question is, how does the system change? And so it's going to take leadership, it's going to take communities, it's going to take parents, it's going to take teachers, it's going to take kids, to start to think about how do we remake that model. Now, part of what we try to do today was to say, we need to rethink the model on multiple levels. Right? We need to think about support systems that address the social and emotional needs of kids. Right? We need to think about how to make it more engaging, more stimulating, more challenging, so that we do some of what Ken Robbins, because the kids are coming curious. They want to learn. We can't allow that to get lost in schools. And then we know that we've also got to figure out how do we build partnerships with community organizations, with parents, because the schools can't do it all by themselves. And so even as we want to move to transformation, we can't move so fast. We can't pretend we're going to leap there beyond the constraints. We have to figure out how do we work within the constraints to do more. And so I want you to think about the process of change. I was very active in the anti-apartheid movement as a student at Berkeley. And while we were in that movement, no one really ever imagined that one day apartheid would end, that Nelson Mandela would be free. We said it, free Mandela, but no one, we just didn't believe it would happen. And lo and behold, wow, it happened. And there was one point when a demonstration we were in at Berkeley, and there were shanty towns in front of California Hall, and the picture of that demonstration appeared on the front page of the Daily Rand in South Africa. We said, wow, they actually are watching what we're doing here. Desmond Tutu, the Archbishop, came to thank us. Several years later, I got to go to South Africa after apartheid ended. And I saw, you know what? Looks like apartheid is still alive and well in South Africa. Right? Not much has changed. The townships are there. And the inequities are as gross as ever. And then I heard a speech by Bishop Tutu. He said, yep, the process of change is slow, but millions more children now today are in school than ever before. Millions more children and families now have clean water and housing than ever before. And he continued to enumerate, to count, to measure the progress. He says, are we where we should be? Not at all. But are we where we were? Not at all. So the process of change takes time. The question is, which direction are we moving in? Are we moving forward or are we moving backward? I think that as we consider what's possible in our schools today and the hard work ahead of us, we can't lose sight of what the goals are. Right? We started by thinking in this center, where could we have an impact and on what kinds of issues? We said, well, this school to prison pipeline has definitely got to be one of them. Because we know right now that we are most likely to incarcerate the children we fail to educate. And we also know that when we educate children well, even when they're in corrections, the likelihood that they will return goes way down. And what's more, if we could change the way we discipline kids right now, we could put far fewer kids on that path to prison. And so we said, let's make this one of the areas we focus in on. We can't do everything, but we can at least work in partnership with schools and with the county. And LA County said, work with us, we're ready. They're doing performance-based assessment right now in LA County schools. And I was out there last January with Debbie Duardo, who was with us last night, the county superintendent. And we visited a school for a correction school for girls last January. She's here, she's ready. And we saw the kids doing project-based learning. They did a whole unit around immigration. And I met a young woman who was explaining her project. And it was they'd read a book called Enrique's Story about kids who traveled on the Beast. Right? That's what they call the trains they travel in on. And as she was talking, I said, I saw the tattoo on her face, had a man's name on the face. And I asked her about it. She said, oh, that was my ex-boyfriend. And the teacher says to me, that's not the boyfriend, that's what pimps do. They mark their faces. I said, well, you know, we're in an environment now where the president doesn't want people like you to come anymore. She said, why doesn't he help us not to come? We'd rather be at home. If they really don't want the immigration, why don't make it possible for us to stay so that we can help our families? That's what we'd rather do. And I said, well, that's what we should be thinking about. Right? That is, the conversations in so many ways about what's possible, what we should do have been stuck. The conversation about education in LA has been stuck. We just witnessed the most expensive school board race in the history of this country, right here. What did we debate? Was it about change? I don't think so. And so if change is going to come, we're going to have to figure out how to get some traction around some ideas in some schools, in some communities that can result in real, genuine change, even if it's incremental, for the kids that need it most and for all kids. And so we're building a network. We've built a network now that involves charters and public schools talking together about math and how to improve it. And many educators who are in the same communities are first time talking to each other, and they say, wow, we've never talked with schools in these neighborhoods. And they're enjoying the chance to talk about something that matters. How do we get kids to improve their performance in math? And then finally, we're going to issue some briefs about the state of education for different groups of kids and what needs to be done to move the needle. Because we know that maybe the policymakers aren't ready, but there are lots of communities that are looking for help to figure out how to do a better job in educating the kids they serve. So I don't want to pretend that transformation is going to happen just because we had a conference. Right? It's not like that. I do hope that over the course of this day, and if you were here yesterday and you heard young people speak about what they want in their education, that we've won over some allies who are ready to work with us. And we have your names now in the database, so you'll be in touch, right? Because we think that if we can mobilize our supporters from different sectors, we can actually start to get things done. I shared the story this morning about that school in South Africa, in the townships, because I was so inspired to see that in the midst of such desolation, there was a community that was thriving, a school that was thriving because they had the power of the people, the power of vision, and the unwillingness to simply wait for the government to act. I think if you could do that in South Africa, you can do that here. And so I encourage you to work with us, and I encourage you to join us on this journey. And I promise you it's not going to be easy or quick, but I think it's going to be worthwhile. And I thank you. And I want to now invite, I promised her, because she wanted to say something yesterday, my youngest child, Ava, because she wanted to share something. She's an enthusiastic student at the lab school. Ava, what do you have to share with the crowd?
Hello, I'm Ava, and I'm 5 years old, and I'm going to recite a poem by Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust or rise. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise by Maya Angelou.
Thank you for being with us. To be continued.